Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Safis Nur Salam and I'm going to do presentation about the study of translation and comparative literature. Literary translation. Literary translation consists of the translation of poetry, plays, literary books, and literary texts as well as songs, rhymes, literary articles, fiction, novels, sorcery, poems, etc. Language and culture translation. Literary translation includes translating novels, prose, plays, and poetry. A literary translator needs good insight into the cultural background and development of the source language. Since works of fiction often contain cultural references, plays on words, slang, and references to the other world, rhythm and style are also even more important in literary texts. This type of translation is more like an art, depending on the subject matter. A literary translator may encounter terms within a specific subject area. Translation of literary styles. Style is the essential characteristic of every piece of writing. The outcome of the writer's personality and his emotion at the moment a single paragraph can be put together without revealing this to some degree the personality of the author. Every writer has literary style and his style is reflected in his writing. Some authors say that a translation should reflect the style of the original text, while others say that the translation should possess the style of the translator. The literary translator has to take into account the beauty of the text, its style, the lexical, grammatical, and phonological features. Some of these may not be the same in the target language. For example, in the Arabic language, you, there is no you, which may be fundamental for a good translation. The aim of translator is that the quality of the translation be the same as the original text without leaving out any of the content. In the general, in literary translation, we translate messages, not meanings. The text must be seen as an integral and coherent piece of work. For example, if we are translating from Arabic into English or vice versa, we must take into account that two realities are very different. The culture have sometimes opposite views on certain matters, as well as scientific and technological development. So the search for equivalent words is more complex. Translation of poetry. In poetry, form is essential to preserve as contents. If the form is not preserved, then neither is the poetry. The degree to which the translation reproduces the form, matter, rhythm, tone, register, etc. of the source language text will be as much determined by the target language system and will also depend on the function of the translation. One of the more difficult things to translate is poetry. It is essential to maintain the flavor of the original text. Translation of prose and poems. Most translation authorities believe in some sort of stylistic laws in translating prose and poems. Let alone for rendering a poem into its equivalent verse, we must bear in mind that we should always be faithful to the meaning of the original poems. Translation of plays. Words in the theater are to be recited, to be said on the stage, and that means a series of restrictions or general conditions to be taken into account. The year it was said and written, the style and the language, etc. The translator should say aloud the words that he is translating. For a play, to hear how they sound and state on stage. One thing is to read and another is to say something. A text can be well translated in a book, but sound awful on the stage. The work of the translator does not end when the work is given to the book to be performed. It is advisable for the translator to work with the actor and the actor to resolve problems when the text is put on stage. There are five literary translation techniques: adaptation, linguistic amplification, compensation, elision, borrowing. Translation study is essential for comparative literature. As it is mentioned before, if translation studies wouldn't be dominant language such as English, French, or Spanish would dominate other minor languages, and there wouldn't be any language diversity in literature. By translating the works of Shakespeare, translator doesn't assimilate the language, but she or he broadens its fame. Through translation, people who speak minor language understand other literature. They can compare and contrast by the other literatures and theirs. By seeing the differences and similarity, they widen their perspective. They can produce different kind of works since they are interacting with other literatures. Comparative literature as well as translation study are disciplines that were inevitably based on hybridity and the crossing cover over the networks. That said, both of them are seen through the prism of cultural and linguistic interaction, or through the lens of the theory of mobility specifically. The relationship between translation studies and comparative literature reveals the complexity and risk of such hybrid discipline, with emphasizing the importance of rethinking their identity and specific features. I think that's all about my presentation, and thank you.